Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullara Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharadataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipa Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetre Kapanai Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gita Amrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you for joining us on this snowy and very cold evening in Chicago. But when we start studying the Bhagavad Gita, I'm sure we're going to warm up in many ways. We are definitely in the latter half of the final chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18. And I'll share a brief review of Krishna's teaching. Having divided 7 topics into groups of 3 based on the gunas, which are sattva, rajas, and tamas, Krishna concluded the topics by saying that everything in creation is governed by these 3 gunas. We've been living for so many years and we didn't even know that. And whenever Krishna makes this division, we should remember that the purpose of him going through all this trouble is that we should pursue the sattvic version and avoid the rajasic and tamasic versions of all the examples. And in all the 7 cases, so sattvic knowledge, doer, sattvic actions, intellect, sattva fortitude and happiness, and so on. And then from the 41st verse onwards, Krishna has begun talking about the division of human beings based on the same 3 gunas, and also their natural duties, which we call swadharma. Swa means one's own, and dharma is dharma, your duty. Krishna emphasizes that one's swadharma is prescribed for them not randomly, but based on the gunas. And nobody paints the gunas on us. We paint it on ourselves from this life and all of our previous lives. So it's not, we can't blame it on anybody else. The duties of brahmanas require sattva guna, and then there's brahmanas. Brahmanas are the sort of like the spiritual leaders of any country. Doesn't have to be India. And they're good at advising people about various things because their intellects are clear. I'm not talking about the people who are born into a Brahmana family. I'm talking about people who have those qualities, which we're going to hear about in a moment. And Kshatriyas, who are the warriors and governmental people, and the merchants, they need rajas, and like that. Each group has a different guna constitution. So that it is a well-planned division, and that is why Krishna says the duties have been allotted based on the predominant guna, which depends on their swabhava, their innate disposition, carried over from previous births. So initially Krishna is going to enumerate those duties, and later in the chapter he's going to convert this into a concept of karma yoga. And then Krishna will sum up karma yoga, jnana, which is knowledge, and bhakti, which is devotion, and conclude the 18th chapter, which is the intention, because it's the last chapter. It's always, like the news. You give the brief announcement in the beginning, then you tell all the news, and at the end you just go over the highlights one more time. It's like what he's doing. So the duties of the four varnas is what we call them, is the preparation for karma yoga. So it's very relevant for all of us, because if you're reading the Bhagavad Gita, it means that you need karma yoga. And on another note, I have a statutory warning to share with you. I'm not a big fan of the word caste. It carries too many negative nuances, not only tied with the social orders in India, but also with the culture of Western imperialism in India that started in the 16th century and continued to India's independence in 1947. So if you give me 1 or 2 minutes to explain, I'll continue. The first Westerner to reach India, as far as we know, was Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer who landed in Kerala, of all places, in 1498. And soon, seeing all the riches in India, well, the Portuguese were back very quickly, maybe a couple of years later. That's fast for back then. And they came back to subdue the inhabitants, who were themselves invaders from the Middle East. The Portuguese quickly built their first fort, and guess where? Cochin, in 1503. With others to follow on India's southwest coast. They had, fort after fort. And they ruled until 1596. And they were the only Western power that colonized even a small portion of India, monopolizing the lucrative trade with Europe. After that, however, there were the Dutch and finally the British, each one of them dislodging the colonial power before them. But it was during the Portuguese era that the Varna caste confusion began. Varna, remember, it means color. And the concept of this Varna order is that the color of your mind determines where you fit in society. So we're going to get into that. It's not, who your mommy is, your daddy is. It's your own mind, because that's what we're responsible for. So the etymology for the English word caste is tied to the Portuguese word casta, which means lineage, race, or breed. And when the colonial powers arrived, they brought with them their own cultural references from feudal, medieval European society, which was already divided into 3 social orders. So the Portuguese used the word casta just as they did in Europe. And the even sadder point is that Indians themselves readily embraced this foreign concept without understanding its meaning, as well as the meaning of the Varna order. So I really would like to avoid that word. I'm going to use the original words, which is probably how everybody should be doing it. And I'll explain whenever something seems a little odd. But let's begin with verse 42. Shamodamas tapashaucham kshantir arjavam evacha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. Now together. Shamodamastapa shaucham kshantirarjavam evacha jnanam vijnanamastikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. today's verses I have edited a lot in some places. Subduing the mind, delete of, subduing the mind and the senses, austerity, purity, forbearance, and also uprightness, and then jnanam and vijnanam, which is the original words for knowledge and wisdom. Actually our version was study of the scriptures and realization of truth. But I'm going to just make it jnanam and vijnanam so we can come back to that. Faith in God, these are the natural duties of the brahmanas. I'll read it again. Subduing the mind and the senses, austerity, purity, forbearance, and also uprightness, jnanam and vijnanam, faith in God, these are the natural duties of the brahmanas. Okay, let's move on to the commentaries. I didn't take any of Shankaracharya's commentary for this verse because he basically says, I already talked about all these qualities in my earlier commentary from chapter 13, 16, 17, so refer to that. So if you, I would recommend some kind of a Shankaracharya commentary on the Gita. There's so many English versions of it out there. I mean, I can propose one next week, but if you have one already, you can check that and you'll see where his comments are and you'll be able to understand how he defines each one of these words. But I would also want to say that this, the part about study of scriptures, meaning knowledge, and realization of truth, meaning vijnanam, that it's comes up in some other commentaries. So I think we need to go over that before we accept it as it is. But Jnaneshwar has many good, his usual wonderful commentary. Just as a chaste wife embraces her husband in private, so too the intellect of a Brahmin, along with the senses, meets the self. He's saying that it's such a special thing that you don't want to, it's like PDA, is that what you call it? You know, public display of affection. That doesn't go well with India's traditional society. And so he's talking from 750 years ago. And so the intimacy, not necessarily with conjugal, but just even hugging, you know, they won't do it in front of anybody. So like that, it's such a special, intimate thing to be with your own self. That's the concept. And the serene state of the intellect is known as self-control. That is called shama. Shama dhamma dayini in the arati. You've heard that all the time. And all of their actions arise from that quality. Just imagine if every one of our actions came from self-control. That's the bar set for a real brahmana. And that's why Amma says, who is a real brahmana these days? You know, nobody does. It's just a name. It doesn't really mean anything. The second quality chastises the unruly sense organs by showing them a club in the form of scriptural injunctions and prevents them from going astray. So scriptural injunctions here can be Amma's words for us. I read in Awakened Children, Amma said such and so. I'm going to share a few of them tonight also. And so that is the club. When the mind says, I want this and that, you said, didn't you remember? Amma said this in Awakened Children, and so we're not going to do it. You sit down, you know. You have to make it, you know, put it in its place. Because we have learned so much from Amma. We just have to repeat her teachings. Fortunately, the mind doesn't have any logic. It just feels and complains. So logic often helps. This quality, which lends a helping hand to self-control, is known as restraint of the senses, dhamma. Just as on the 6th day after the birth of a child, the flame of a lamp is watched during the night, so that it does not get extinguished, so too the Brahmana keeps thinking of God all the time. There must be some tradition, or it was before, that you have to watch a lamp on the night of the 6th day after a baby is born to make sure that that light doesn't go out. And that's why they're so intent on looking at the flame. If you turn your back and it goes out, you would think it's really inauspicious. So like that, I have to think of God all the time, and if I forget about God, it's just a horrible thing. Like Amma, as a little girl, she would walk, wherever she would go, she would repeat her mantra, which was just Om, 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 and if she forgot, she will go backwards to where she forgot and then resume from there. That's where we're learning from all of these stories from Amma. This is known as austerity, tapas, which is the third function of a Brahmana. They haven't spoken about anything about concrete, like, you have to do a puja in the morning, you have to use a special soap, or you have to comb your hair like this. No, there's nothing like that. Among these functions is the quality of purity, which is twofold. The mind is full of pure thoughts, and the body is adorned with good actions, thus making the entire life pure, both internally and externally. Interestingly, he didn't say anything about, purifying the physical body. He just says your good actions are the purifying effect. So that's, kind of unexpected when you're reading it. This state is called purity, Opartha, and that is the fourth quality found in the actions of a Brahmana. Now the all-enduring power like that of the earth is called forbearance. This is the fifth quality of the actions of a Brahmana, which is as sweet as the fifth musical note. If you're a musician, you might know what that means. I think it has something to do with Indian classical music, but I couldn't figure out. I mean, I can guess, but maybe we'll have to figure that one out next time. The river flows straight to the sea, even if its currents are crooked, and sugarcane has the same sweetness, even if its shape is irregular. Like this, behaving in a straightforward manner, even with a hostile person, is the sixth quality known as uprightness. Just as a gardener waters the tree and labors over it, in full knowledge that their effort will find its reward when the tree bears fruit, so too it is knowledge by which one knows that by performing actions strictly according to the scriptures, one attains the Supreme Self. So in the case of the gardener, the fruit is literally fruit. But for a seeker, then that knowledge and that process renders self-realization. And that requires knowledge, which he says is the seventh quality in a Brahmana. Trusting the words of these scriptures and the Guru. That's the point. Not just like a roll of dice, implicitly. Then when the intellect merges in the nature of the self beyond doubt, at the time of purification of the self, it is said to be wisdom or realization, resulting from scriptural knowledge or the power of meditation. This is the eighth gem. So the last one is knowledge that, let's say the Guru. The Guru's teachings are good for us. That's knowledge. Vijnana, in this case, can be said to be the wisdom, or if you say all the way, he could be talking about God realization too. It's a little difficult to understand which one he means. But if you can take it as like an exalted state, it could be wisdom. But if it's realization, that's, the same word can be used for either one. So you have to there's no correct answer. It's left to our interpretation. Faith in the existence of God is the ninth quality. As the keeper of the royal seal, whoever it may be is served by the public. So too, whoever follows the path laid down by the scripture is endowed with this quality. The possession of religious faith in an eminent degree is the true function of a brahmana. In this way, wherever these 9 qualities are seen without a taint, that is the natural function of a brahmana. I mean, having those qualities to some degree alone is good enough, but without a taint, I mean, there's only Amma. I think that's the only way we can say. There's only one brahmana on this planet. Thus, a brahmana wears a necklace of these 9 gems and is verily the ocean of these 9 gems, just as the sun is always endowed with its own light, or the jasmine tree is decorated with its own flowers. It's beautiful. Or the sandalwood tree is permeated by its own fragrance. So too, these 9 virtues are the spotless ornaments of a brahmana and are not separate from them. I think we'd all like to be intoxicated by our own fragrance, but kind of the opposite most of the time, I think. All right, Jid Bhavananda Swami's commentary. One imbued with all qualities conducive to a spiritual life is a brahmana. See, they're talking about the exact same verse, but each one of them has a different commentary, which is so nice. Self-control and self-discipline are as natural and agreeable to them as water is to a duckling. Their mind being turned towards sublime subjects, serenity is the norm for them. He's talking about brahmanas. Sense control is a painful warfare to an ordinary person, but to the brahmana it is a matter of course. Sublimation of the body, mind, and speech is austerity. This merit finds its full expression in a spiritual person. A thing that retains its original state is said to preserve its purity. If you didn't know, when we talk about removing impurities from the mind and our subtle body, it just means we're going back to our original state, because all of these impurities are considered to be foreign objects. They don't belong there. Actually, nothing belongs there except for consciousness. So that's why he's putting it this way. The spiritual person is fixed in the feeling that they are the Atman. Their body and senses behave in tune with this divine feeling. Therefore, purity and the Brahmana are one and the same. The even tenor of the Mahatma's spiritual life is bound to be bothered by others, but they are never affected, nor do they even think of retaliating. Calm forgiveness is their way. Their thought, word, and deed being ever directed to the welfare of all, there is uprightness in every bit of their actions. They are as trustworthy to people as the mother is to her baby. It's like Amma's biodata, everything he's saying. The Brahmana begins his life with scriptural knowledge, and they fulfill it with intuitive knowledge or God realization, that is vijnana. Any amount of scriptural knowledge without God realization, vijnana, that yields nothing. So if you just get more intelligent and more knowledgeable, it's a waste. Faith is more than a formal belief in God and the hereafter. It is a burning faith in the divine aspect of life and its eternal nature. A Brahmana holds themselves as a pilgrim on earth and not as one belonging to it. That's what Amma says. She says that we're all travelers here, and we came and then we'll eventually go. At least this body will. A simple life with few earthly possessions distinguishes them from others. While living in the body, they are not of the body. They love all beings alike and feel universal kinship. Every time I read, every line, that we hear is definitely a description of Amma. So, a few other thoughts to share. As Brahmanas, who are also called Brahmins, the ethical and spiritual standards of society go up. And remember, we're not talking about people's last names and things like that. We're talking about, could be anybody from any country. If they have these qualities, they qualify. And to the extent they qualify, they're helping the world. Amma's life of renunciation and self-dedication is the model of the ideal Brahmana. Shama and Dhamma are considered to be a prerequisite for Vedantic study. Oops. Do we have our mind and senses completely under control? Then we don't qualify really. So in Kali Yuga, Amma's giving us a little bit of a break, a discount. But for a Brahmana, it is a prerequisite period. It's not a question of whether you're studying Vedanta or not. If you're a Brahmana, then you have to maintain your Shama and Dhamma, self-control and sense control. In Japan, parents tell their kids to behave properly because they are Japanese. You're Japanese, you shouldn't be doing that kind of a thing. So, Shama and Dhamma are required because you're a Brahmana. You're a Brahmin, why are you doing that? I mean, it's not to insult people, but it's nice to think of it that way. If we want to aspire to higher levels of spirituality, we just follow these 9 gems, as he calls them. It's not a requirement for the rest of society to have Shama and Dhamma, unless they want to study Vedanta like we are studying. So, in other words, becoming and remaining a Brahmana involves a lot of inner shraddha, a lot of awareness with what's going on in our mind, so that they can maintain the sattvic quality of the mind. This verse mentions the key methods that support that process. And that was tapas. After that, discipline, especially spiritual discipline. We should not give ourselves over to desires and pleasure if we aspire to become a Brahmana. And just as brahmacharis and sannyasis' lives should be disciplined, the same goes for a Brahmana, even if he's a householder. They enjoy minimum pleasures, mostly from what they receive from other people without asking. Anyhow, when death approaches, everybody has to relinquish all pleasures, so a life of moderation makes the final transition relatively painless. Purity, we already heard about, it's internal and external. And kshantihi is not getting irritated, we heard that. We saw this also in chapter 13 when he said, he was enumerating all these words: humility, absence of hypocrisy, non-violence, forbearance. That came up already. A Brahmana should not get angry, so the phrase, an angry Brahmana, is an oxymoron, because the phrase contradicts itself. Arjavam is straightforwardness. It's alignment of thought, word, and deed. No split personality. That's not so easy these days. We mean what we say what we mean, we do what we mean, and we mean what we do. No furtive intentions. Only one well-known, in one well-known Dharma Grantha, which is called Manusmriti. It's not an authority on Vedanta, but it has some nice sayings about spirituality. And it says there's Satyam Vada. It means say the truth. And for everybody else, we have to say Satyam Vada. But if it's a Brahmana, we just have to say Vada, which means speak. Because the Brahmana never lies, so you don't have to say, it's extra to say, speak the truth. Because they're always speaking the truth. So it would be beautiful if we could reach that state. The knowledge, we can think of it as just the life occupation of these Brahmanas. Their whole life is dedicated to that, nothing else. And they teach others as well. Vijnanam, like I said, has 2 interpretations. We could take jnanam or knowledge to mean all non-Vedantic sciences, like the knowledge of other schools of thought, rituals, Jyotish. Yes, Jyotish is not connected with Advaita and Vedanta. It's just a tool that we use in that tradition. These are all called apara vidya, which means they are not the highest knowledge. But the other interpretation of vijnanam is paravidya, meaning the highest knowledge. They not only study the scriptures, they live in the scripture. They live the scriptures, and they are an embodiment of the scriptures. So that is Amma again. And faith, we know about that, is faith in Guru God and the scriptures. And Amma has a beautiful story about faith. You know, Amma loves to hear about the faith of small children. So I'm going to share one of those stories. A young man asked Amma a question. Does ordinary water become Ganges water through mantra japa? Amma replied, yes, it will. But faith is important, not the water. That's beautiful. Then she began a story. She said, one small boy saw the priests worshipping a Shiva Linga in the temple. He cherished an intense desire to do the same, but he wasn't allowed to go into the temple because he wasn't a Brahmin. The thought of performing a puja to the Shiva Linga became stronger and stronger in his innocent heart. One day, he got an idea. He took some stones and placed them on top of each other. Considering that as Lord Shiva, he started doing the worship. But the poor boy didn't have any of the necessary ingredients, so he offered plain water, imagining that it was rose water, and then sand became the food offering, and he used pebbles instead of camphor for the arati. After the worship, the boy sat in meditation just as he had seen the priests do, all the while thinking of Lord Shiva. Seeing their friend doing the puja to the Shiva Linga, they sat around him and imitated him, making Shiva Lingas, and then they closed their eyes and as though they were meditating. Later, their parents came in search of them and saw that they were what they were doing. Taking it as insignificant child's play, the parents knocked down all the Shiva Lingas. The children got frightened and ran back to their homes, except for the first boy. He remained there motionless. When he finally opened his eyes, he found that his Shiva Linga had been knocked over. He burst into tears and called aloud, "Oh Lord, what happened to you? Where are you? What am I going to do now?" A few seconds later, who showed up? Lord Shiva himself appeared before the boy and blessed him. That is the power of faith, according to Amma. The Lord was pleased even when worshipped with sand and stones. All those ingredients, though imagined, became real owing to the faith of that innocent child, as the Lord was pleased. And for us boring adults, much of spirituality is not verifiable through our five senses, like reincarnation, the law of karma, the effects of pujas, self-realization. When I first got interested in all these things, my old friends were arguing with me and say, what's the proof? And I just gave up because I hit a brick wall. Amma says that today's science is not advanced enough to prove these things without a doubt, but it will ultimately succeed sometime in the future. The reason for this is that spirituality, or we could call it maybe metaphysics, by definition is beyond the intellect, because the intellect cannot comprehend Advaita. The intellect needs duality to comprehend a concept. But Advaita is the philosophy of non-duality. So when Krishna says in the Gita, yajna, which means selfless actions, yajna brings rain. There's no scientific proof of that because spiritual laws transcend the physical laws. The only choice is to believe and have faith. This is one of the most important qualities for any seeker, especially a Brahmana. Without faith, we cannot call ourselves spiritual. According to Krishna, these 9 characteristics are the duties of a Brahmana. It also means anything incompatible with any of these is thus forbidden for a Brahmana. It's like smoking and intoxicants are forbidden for a pregnant woman. There's no two ways about it. Their entire life should be dedicated to the spiritual health of all. That means that, strictly speaking, they should not have a day job, taking a salary, not to mention military service. Brahmanas like Drona were allowed to teach martial arts, but forbidden to participate in warfare, although he broke that rule in the Mahabharata war. If anyone says that such a life, the life of a Brahmana, is going to be boring, that just shows that they don't qualify, so don't try to argue with them and tell them to go for it, you know. Or you could tell them to spend some time on tour with Amma, and they will understand that such a life is anything but boring. As rajas increases, the mind's activity also increases, and a restless mind will always be full of desires. It is never content, thus such a person will not be able to appreciate a Brahmana's life until they reduce their desires, which means acquiring more inner purity, which means going back to your original state. And remember, food has a huge effect on our mind. So if you want your diet to support your inner purity, please review chapter 17, verses 8 to 10 with the commentaries. Now let us go to verse 43. Sauryam tejo Tritradaksham Yudhe chapya palayanam Danam Ishvara. Sorry, we have to chant this together, with two words together. Danam Ishvara Bhavascha Kshatram karma swabhavajam. Now together. Sauryam tejo dhritir-daksham yudhe chapya palayanam danameshwara bhavascha kshatram karma swabhavajam. I only changed a couple places. Prowess. Valor, I added some words, but I'll share later. Fortitude, dexterity, and also not running away from battle. Generosity and lordliness are the natural duties of the Kshatriyas. I changed sovereignty because it sounds literally like you're ruling over a country or something like that. But lordliness has more of a symbolic meaning. So that's why I changed it. Now we'll go to the commentaries. Shankaracharya has some good refinements of the words. He says prowess is the disposition of a hero, or we could call heroism, which is the inclination to attack even those who are mightier than oneself. Then valor, which I thought we could also call it vigor or splendor. He's calling it the strength of character, which is not submitting to the humiliation of defeat at the hands of another. Fortitude is self-command, a mind that doesn't become depressed in any situation whatsoever. That would be wonderful to have. Dexterity is the capacity of an expert in their duties, which arise all of the sudden without getting embarrassed. Lordliness is exercising power to rule when needed. These are the duties prescribed for Kshatriyas, born of their own nature. Every time he says born of their own nature, it's not somebody imposing it on them. Jnaneshwar's commentary now. The sun never expects any help in giving light, nor does the male lion seek anybody's company in hunting. Female lionesses do hunt in groups. In the same way, possession of innate strength without anybody's help is prowess, which is the foremost virtue of a kshatriya. The sun, with its light, makes numerous stars invisible, but the stars along with the moon are not able to make the sun imperceptible. That which takes the whole world by surprise through its own grandeur, but does not lose its currents under any circumstance, is his adventurous spirit, which is the second virtue of a kshatriya, known as valor. Even if the sky were to come down with a crash, the kshatriya's mind and intellect do not become unsettled. This is real fortitude, their third virtue. However deep the water may be, the lotus comes up and blooms over it. However high a thing is, the sky towers above it. However serious the situation may be, these kshatriyas remain engaged in their work. This is the fourth virtue of a kshatriya, known as dexterity. Same qualities, but described in different ways from each of the commentators. The warrior spirit is the fifth virtue of the kshatriyas. Just as the sunflower plant remains facing the sun, so too a kshatriya stands face to face before their enemy and fights with them. Just as a pregnant woman avoids conjugal relations with her husband by whatever means, so too the kshatriya does not retreat from the battlefield, turning their back to the enemy. This virtue of a kshatriya surpasses the first four virtues. How does a 16-year-old kid know all these things? You know, it's just like, that's how old he is when he made this. When a tree bears fruits and flowers, it drops them down. The bed of the lotus plants generously spread out fragrance. The moonlight can be enjoyed by everyone to their heart's content. In the same way, kshatriyas give gifts to those in need. This is the sixth virtue, known as generosity. To become the only center from which flows authority and to protect the subjects is known as lordliness. This power of governance, which is the prince among virtues of a warrior, is the seventh virtue. We'll get a little more explanation about these in a moment. As the sky looks resplendent with the seven sages, what we call the Big Dipper, so too these seven virtues adorn a warrior. Actions endowed with these seven virtues are the natural qualities of a kshatriya. They are like the earth surrounded by the seven seas, or like the holy Ganges formed of seven currents in the form of these seven virtues. Now the commentary of Swami Chidbhavananda. It is only after becoming an ideal person that one becomes a brahmana. The ideal person is found in the kshatriya, who is devoted to putting mundane life in perfect order. The literal meaning of the word kshatriya is one who always protects others from injury. I think most of us don't, or even when I was not a Swami, I think a lot of us just don't qualify because it's such a high standard that we're hearing here. Even though Jnanadev is from 750 years ago, the Gita is 5,500 years old or something like that. The kshatriya has dedicated their body for the good of the world. In the course of that noble endeavor, their body may be hurt or even destroyed. The destruction of the body is no loss to them, but reconciliation with a dharma is the worst loss that he can sustain. The intensity of the training may vary, but the process cannot be avoided. Just as a farmer is obliged to eradicate the pest that attacks his crop, the kshatriya is duty-bound to oppose the evils in society. Fortitude is the frame of mind which is firm and dominant, even when overpowered by the enemy. Dexterity is the resourcefulness that comes at the right place, time, and strategy, in war and peace, as quick reactions to the changing situations. Never heard a definition of dexterity that sounded like this, but it's beautiful. A sudden crisis causes no confusion in the mind of a person gifted with this virtue. In India, it's constant, especially in Amrita Puri, it's amplified another 1,000 times. And that's why Amma's teaching all these characteristics to people who live in the ashram, because you have to be dexterous. Similarly, it's kind of like war hell there, because there's so many things going on, and you're always on a war footing. But on no account should a kshatriya flee from the battle due to fear. Generosity is the art of administration that allows the maximum facilities and prosperity to go to others. With a parental attitude, the kshatriya should be ever intent on providing for public welfare rather than hoarding for private use. Maintaining law and order and guiding people to be law-abiding is the outcome of the virtue lordliness. In a kshatriya, this comes automatically to one who resolved to serve the people. So you don't, it's not like you go to school and you learn how to do that. I mean, you can learn a little bit, but that position should fit your inner disposition. Otherwise, you won't do a good job. So he's saying that it's automatic. The spirit of renunciation is the guiding factor in this respect. The kshatriya is the protector of society. By self-discipline and self-dedication, they rise to undertake this divine duty. The spiritual culture of the brahmana and the earthly resources of the vaishya become harmonious. Vaishya means the traders, the business people. The spiritual culture of the brahmana and the earthly resources of the vaishya become harmoniously blended in the kshatriya, who harnesses and utilizes them for the welfare of society. That's what a ruler should be doing. I think everybody's confused these days. There's no more like these sages that advise the rulers from a selfless standpoint. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. Now, a little more commentary to add. As you can see, the disciplines for a kshatriya are quite different from the brahmanas' disciplines. Their diet, daily routine, and rules of conduct are all different. And what is becoming to a brahmana is considered to be shameful for a kshatriya. What if a sannyasi eats meat, which is common for warriors? What if a police officer sees a thief taking the purse of an elderly woman and starts chanting "Loka Samasta" instead of arresting the culprit? What are you doing? You're a police officer. So, a kshatriya can have compassion in their heart while performing bold actions. They need both a strong body and a strong mind. Even still, they may be exposed to extreme circumstances, so they may need some pleasures to calm down their mind and soothe their mental pain. Just think about the military firefighters, when they come home, they might not be in a mood to, they just want to forget everything because it was, so much pain and suffering that you just witnessed. So if they have the good faith, they can go to their puja room, or they might indulge in some pleasures just to calm themselves down. That is why pleasures are allowed for these kshatriyas. And their duties also are completely different from a brahmana. They must be brave, ever ready to die or kill for dharma. Obviously, that requires a lot of courage and willpower, which also gives them the ability to handle any conflict to the end, regardless of the outcome. Another question came to Amma, probably one that maybe a lot of people have thought of. A young man, again, these college-age people used to come to Amma and ask all these questions. Now she has her own college, and they come and give satsangs on the stage. So one of these young boys said, "Soldiers kill people. Isn't that a sin?" What do you think Amma said? And she said, "Yeah, it's a sin. I don't know why we have a military, right?" No. Amma replied, "Son, it is not for their own selfish purpose that they do that. It is for the nation, to protect the country from its enemies, isn't it? That is their duty. It is the dharma of a kshatriya to fight. There's no sin in it. Sin is incurred when somebody acts solely on the basis of his likes and dislikes, as in taking revenge on someone, hating someone, killing to take another person's wealth, and other evil actions." So we have to accept that it's coming from Amma. It's her dictum that we must believe. That's where faith comes in. If we cannot believe it, then we have a problem. Kshatriyas also need the flexibility to change tactics on the fly, whether it is on the battlefield or in a conference room. Nevertheless, they must be generous too. So they need a certain amount of wealth and possessions to serve the needy in society. Brahmanas, on the other hand, are recipients of such generosity because they have no other income, or at least they're not supposed to have any. When Amma first told me to study Jyotish, Indian astrology, I was learning from different people, and then I was told to go to a particular Jyotishi in Haripad, near the ashram, and everybody calls him Warrior, sir. His last name is Warrior, not Warrior, Warrior. And he was a very great astrologer, and I was learning from him, and I went back to Amritapuri, and she asked me again, "Did you go?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Did you give him any dakshina? Did you give him any offering of money?" And I was like, "I'm a brahmachari." What? Then I was a brahmachari. I was like, "How?" And she goes, "Well, you have money to go on the bus and all that. You have to give him some money too." So I was like, wow. Even Amma saying that she doesn't have any money of her own, and he has a house of his own, wife. But it's the tradition. She says that's why you have to do it. We have to give something. That's our duty, no matter who we are. He's obviously a Brahmin. Though a Kshatriya should try to control his mind and senses, they may have to show some anger, even if it's just an act. Amma does it all the time, right? With the kids, she scolds them because they're doing, weird things, fighting in front of her, getting all emotional. The same goes for their ego. You cannot manage an entire country on humility. There should be a modicum of rulership ego to command the authority needed. All of these attributes are rajas, or rajo guna, and should be natural to the kshatriya in order to succeed. But the kshatriya's rajas is supported by sattva, purity, which means they will work hard, but selflessly too. Whatever they get, they will dedicate it to the greater good. These days, however, it is very common to see countries run by business people, which in some countries can even result in the leaders taking public funds for their own purposes. So that's why we have to be judicious when voting. Sannyasis don't vote, but for everybody else, you have to think of what a real ruler is. I'm not saying who it is and who to vote for, but they have to have these qualities if they're going to be a good leader, especially for a big country. Now we'll move on to the last two of the four varnas. Krishigo Rakshavanijam Vaishyakarma Swabhavajam paricharyatmakam karma Shudrasyapi Swabhavajam. Now once together. Krishi Gorakshavanijam Vaishakarma Swabhavajam Paricharyatmakam Karma Shudrasyapi Swabhavajam. I didn't change it. You can see it on the screen. Agriculture, cattle rearing, and trade are the duties of the Vaishyas born of their own nature. And action consisting of service is the duty of the Shudras born of their own nature. Now we'll go to the commentaries. I skipped Shankaracharya because it was not so important. But Jnaneshwar says, to make vast profits on the threefold capital of land, seed, and the plow. In short, farming, rearing of cattle, and buying commodities cheap and then selling them at higher prices, and to maintain themselves by performing such actions is the natural duty of the Vaishya. So taking a profit is not bad. It's actually accepted. And they sell things at higher prices. That's because they're taking chances. They're going to buy something in a large quantity, and they have the means to do so. But other people, maybe if they don't want to take the risk, then they're happy to pay higher prices so that in small quantities. So they may have big companies and all that. So they need that extra income. And to support the first three varnas, the first three categories through service, is the function of the Shudras. We're going to hear more about the Shudras in a moment. Now, Chidbhavananda Swami's commentary. Vaishya means traders, merchants, business people like that, entrepreneurs. The Vaishya is one who creates and distributes the material wealth of society. Ah, that's why it's okay. Because he doesn't hang on to it himself. He keeps some, he's a little selfish, but he's also generous. The time-honored means for this are agriculture, cattle rearing, and trade. Over the course of time, tapping the resources of nature has developed into huge industries. These are all the occupations of the Vaishya. The four varnas are all based on the qualities of the mind. Just a reminder. These natural classifications can be found in all societies and countries. Yes, even in America. Because it's just the mind. If you think you don't have a mind, then you have another problem. Among four siblings, it is possible to find these four varnas. It is also possible to find social groups given predominantly to one of the four varnas. Ultimately, the idea is for everybody to become brahmanas. Amma has said that also. Brahmanas, their job is to make everybody a brahmana, which is nice to know. You know, that, and then if we feel that we're advancing spiritually, then we should also help others, come with us. And that means sometimes if you want to do one thing, but the other person is too difficult for the other person, you have to adjust to the other person because you're the senior person, so to speak, spiritually. A brahmana is one who can discharge the dharmas of all four varnas. That's what happens in Amma's ashram. You come in, you do something simple like doing maybe the incense sticks, just dip it in there and wrap them up like that. It's a mechanical job. And then you learn to do more things, more responsibility, until someday, all the senior swamis, the first batch that came in the late 70s, early 80s, they all got that kind of a training. Now they're all, the senior most disciples. but they started off by peeling, from the, what they call veggie chopping and all that. So you go through that process and you learn how to do all these things so you can teach others how to do it. That's what a Brahmana does, actually. A Kshatriya can discharge the dharmas of 3 varnas. A Vaishya can carry out the duties of 2 varnas, while the Shudra do their own dharma. Though there are differences in the attainments of the 4 varnas, there is no differentiation among their dharmas. The dharma of one is as sacred and conducive to enlightenment as that of the other one. A Shudra is as much competent for the practice of yoga as others are. It is not unusual for Mahatmas to have disciples of varying spiritual preparedness, but through their devotion they rise to the pinnacle of realization. So many people from Europe and other countries, Far East, in the ancient times these people were not even included in the society. They wouldn't teach them anything. And Amma's just dragging down or getting rid of all of these the blockages in the tradition. Women can do whatever they can do in the ashram. They have to learn puja, astrology. Like 1,000 years ago or several hundred years ago, women couldn't do any of these things. It wasn't allowed. So Amma has not only taken unprepared people, but she's changed the rules of what preparedness is. Now, I'm adding a little more commentary. Keep in mind, Krishna's time, which was before the Bronze Age, in that time cows represented wealth, in India at least. So protecting cows meant protecting the country's wealth. That, agriculture and commerce were the closest thing to GNP at that time. I think India should add spirituality in it to its GNP, because that's the most important thing in the whole world. And all these jobs are given to the Vaishyas, which is to increase the country's wealth and distribute it to all fairly. If you have morals, you'll be able to do that. That's the kind of business people we want. Since the Vaishyas' activities have a bit of selfishness mixed in, they make sure that they receive their fair share for their service. They're not going to do it for free. They don't work overtime without extra pay. They are in the middle of it all, and they know how to increase their own fortune, resulting in them having a larger responsibility to help the vulnerable sections of society. That means they have to build schools for children, temples for brahmanas, and like widows, they have to take care of them, and any kind of injustice and vulnerable sections of society have to be taken care of by these Vaishyas. In a social way, the Kshatriyas do it as a government activity or something like the military, police, and so on. But the Vaishyas have to do all these social welfare projects. The Shudra's job is supporting everything in society. Temples and ashrams need support. Government institutions need support. The military needs civilian employees. Agriculture and trading fields also need support. Most people in the world are not entrepreneurs, so the majority of employees are Shudras. Every job I ever had until I joined the ashram at the age of 24, I think, it was a Shudra job. I did work for the Japanese government, but I wasn't an official or anything like that. I was just, a guest, so to speak. So I looked at the statistics for America, and I found that the number of people employed in 2021 was a bit more than 158 million people, or roughly half of the population. And then you have kids and you have elderly, so it's understandable. But of those 158 million people, jobs in education and health comprise 15%. They're the Brahmanas. Government jobs is 14%, and those are the Kshatriyas, which means about 70% of jobs fall into the categories of Vaishyas and Shudras. In other words, if you are not a pastor, a healthcare worker, or an educator of some kind, probably every job you had so far was not a Brahmana or Kshatriya occupation, like me. All we can do is what we know how to do, but by doing what we are good at, both we and society benefit. In the Rig Veda, it says that the Kshatriya represents the arms of the universal person. I told you that last week, I think, too. Like the Kshatriyas, with the arms one can defend a person or oneself, like the way Kshatriyas defend society. Even in English, we call weapons arms. And the feet are compared to the Shudra and in the universal person. And the feet support all the other parts of the body. If you've ever had a problem with your feet and you can't stand up, you'll know how important your feet are and how indispensable they are. All movement is possible only due to the feet, so there is no inferiority or superiority. Even when we do puja, we offer flowers to the feet. The 4 different functions are all important. That is why duties cannot be mandated. Whatever path you choose, whatever your profession you choose, you have to do it properly. And we will now move on to verse 45. Swe swe karmanyabhirataha samsiddhim labate naraha swakarma nirata siddhim yatha vindati tachrano. Now together. Swe swe karmanyabhirataha samsiddhim labhate naraha swakarma nirata siddhim yatha vindati tachrano. It's so much easier to chant it together instead of piecemeal. A few minor changes here. Keenly devoted to their own duty. The word natural, I don't think it's there, but I know it means that. One attains the highest one attains the highest perfection, and in parentheses, in the shape of God realization. Now hear how a person engaged in their own duty can attain perfection. So, I don't think natural was there on the first line, so I put that in parentheses. Changed the gender specificity on both lines. And I put that in the shape of God realization because I think it needs to be explained in the commentary before. As I have said many times before, our Gita assumes that you're not going to be, watching these. It's actually before all these COVID and everything started, and it was just a book that we had from at least 10, 15 years ago. And so they're just assuming that that this is your textbook. So they included a lot of the nuances of the commentaries, especially Shankaracharya's commentary. That's why I'm separating them, because we're going to hear the Shankaracharya commentary anyhow. There's a nice, I'm going to give Amma's commentary, so to speak. because she has a nice quote that fits here. Know your dharma and strive to live accordingly. Perform your actions without any expectations. Don't expect love, wealth, fame, or anything else. What? I got to do all this and I can't expect anything? That's not easy. The aim of our actions should be to purify our inner self. Oh, well, that's actually kind of cool. I think I'm good with that. Be attached only to what is spiritual, for only then will you experience true happiness. If you do an action expecting to get something back from others, suffering will be your only companion, not the kind of companion I want. But if you live in harmony with spiritual principles, you will be in heaven here on earth and in heaven after death. You will benefit both yourself and the world. Shankaracharya says that this phrase, keenly devoted, it means exclusively. So there's no other option. You're devoted to your duty exclusively. And this word one means the person whose duty it is to practice karma yoga, because this verse is specifically for somebody who needs to practice karma yoga. So he doesn't want people to misconstrue and think that everybody, even a jnani or even somebody who is more advanced, has to do it this way. No, it's just for us. And then the part about attains the highest perfection, Shankaracharya takes it this way: consisting of the body and the sense organs becoming qualified for steadfast adherence in the path of knowledge, when all their impurities have been destroyed by performing their duties. So he's saying that the highest perfection you can get from doing your duty is not liberation. He's saying you're one step away from, one or two steps ahead, behind realization. So he's putting like a proviso there. We'll hear more now. Jnaneshwar says, O intelligent Arjuna, that's a nice way of putting it because he's going to have to dissect a few things here. Just as the organs have their proper objects such as sound, so too these different duties are proper for the four varnas. Rainwater falling from the sky has the river as its proper destination, and the river goes to the sea. In the same way, the performance of proper actions according to the varna and stage of life befits the performer. The stage of life is a whole other idea. It's just childhood up to age 20, marriage, then vanaprastha, you kind of recede from society, and then sannyasa. So that's what he means by the both of those. Please, therefore, fix your mind on performing your natural duties as laid down by the scriptures. Even if one's vision is good, it is of no avail in the dark. If one does not know which way to go, what use are their legs? Therefore, one must know by reference to the scripture what duty is proper for them according to their varna. So he just gave it to us. He gave us the duties of all these people, different types of people. And if you can't do the Brahmana version, you look at the Kshatriya one. Well, can I do this? Maybe not. Maybe Vaishya, maybe I can do the Vaishya version of it. And if you're like, I can't do any of those, then you go, okay, just do whatever you can. That's the answer. If the treasure in the house is revealed by a lamp, is there any problem in securing it? In the same way, they perform their prescribed duties that have fallen to their lot and have the sanction of the scriptures. They are then engrossed in the performance of these duties, giving up lethargy and renouncing the fruit of action. Just as water flowing in a stream does not go any other way, so too their actions are in accordance with the scriptures, leading to non-attachment, which is an entrance to moksha. So, the same thing that he's been talking about, and In chapter earlier, in chapter 18, and in the Karma Yoga section of the Gita, you have to relinquish your identification with the action and the attachment to the fruit. And he's saying these people have no interest in selfish actions. They dissolve the duties that they perform by the renunciation of their fruit and reach the border of liberation. All four of them do, right? We're not talking about Brahmins anymore. This non-attachment is the culmination of all their labors, whatever it may be, in the path of action. It is the flower of the tree in the form of good actions, which makes certain the attainment of liberation. All right, don't give up on us, please. This non-attachment is like the dawn, which heralds the sunrise in the form of self-realization. It is the divine eyewash which shows them the buried treasure in the form of self-knowledge, and they apply it wholeheartedly to their inner eye. In this way, Arjuna, by performing prescribed actions, they make themselves worthy for the attainment of liberation. You have to earn it, right? This prescribed duty is the sole support to the seeker, and its performance is the highest service to me. He's talking as Krishna, the all-pervasive Supreme God. Bhavananda Swami's commentary says, to whatever station in life one has made themselves competent, that is their swadharma. One who discharges their swadharma jubilantly and efficiently becomes a good seeker, means a sadhak, spiritual seeker. The temporary disgust that Arjuna harbored for his swadharma was not born of mature understanding. It was the outcome of a momentary delusion. One who abhors their duty can never become great. A model student is one who applies themselves diligently and delightfully to their studies. They are loyal to the grade in which they are placed, so that they may proceed to the next grade when the time comes. It is our swadharma to proceed steadily to the higher grades. So you don't have to be, immersed in that one group forever. You can always move on. That's what the first batch of Amma's disciples did that. They came, they didn't know anything. Most of the men didn't even know how to wash their clothes. So Amma taught them everything. And she's teaching us everything. So we can go from Shudra to whatever we are capable of doing. So this verse is for emphasizing the importance of swadharma, because all the four duties are important. We need people dedicated to spirituality, people dedicated to governance and safety. We need people who make goods flow from one place to another as needed, and the majority of us who support the first three. Each person can feel proud of their own contribution. And the best thing about this verse is that Lord Krishna says the goal of all of our efforts is moksha. We're not going anywhere else. With the previous teachings about Karma Yoga, we know that performing our actions sincerely with a detached attitude, we are purified internally, which is needed for moksha. There's no moksha without internal purification. The immediate goal is chitta shuddhi, that inner purification. But that comes through our swadharma, our natural duty. And the ultimate goal is moksha, God realization. We can say that everybody needs or wants moksha because it is the end of all sorrows, and no one's going to say, no, I want to be, sorrowful. And their nationality or religious viewpoints are irrelevant in the question of wanting peace or not, because it's a foregone conclusion. The best part of Krishna's methodology is that no one needs to change their profession to get inner purification. Continue whatever you are doing now, just with a different viewpoint, a different vision. And in the next verse, we will learn how everybody doing their different duties receive the same result of inner purification. Krishna will explain the yoga attitude, which is which is what secures the results. And if each person has that attitude, the fruit will be the same. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And if everybody does it in the same way, they're going to get the same fruit of inner purification. The correct attitude is called by various names. You may have heard of Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, Samarpana Buddhi, Pujamano Bhavam, like this. So they all mean the same thing. The first is like we're doing our actions as an offering to the Lord, or actually the second one is also it's surrendering to the guru or the deity. That's the second kind of attitude towards your actions. And puja mano bhava means you're doing your actions with a devotional mood, like you're doing a puja. And it doesn't matter which varna you may be in to do this. Of course, all of this is the same karma yoga Krishna taught us before, but we can definitely use a refresher because that was 15 chapters ago. Shankaracharya gives us an introduction to the next verse. Is this perfection attained directly by just performing one's prescribed duty? No. Then how? He's talking to himself. And he concludes that introduction by saying, now hear the manner in which one engaged in their own duty does attain perfection. In the next class. I'm not sure what's happening next week. Hopefully we'll do it. I'm not sure. Well, we have a lot of challenges with the snow here, but expect that we'll be doing it next week. And I have 8 minutes left to answer some questions. There was one person, Kameshwari, who requested the previous classes that are not publicly shown. If it's Kameshwari, can you send me your email address to the same form that you used, and I'll send you the list. And the next question is, what is the best English translation of the Gita, and what are the titles of the commentaries that you reference? So, not all commentaries sort of go along with everybody else. They might not resonate with you, the one that I like, but I'll just say for basic study, I recommend Swami Chidbhavananda's Gita, the one that I'm quoting from. It gives the meaning of each word in the verses, and it has a kind of a shortish commentary, so you don't get bogged down in a lot of kind of old language. It's also a little old English, but not as old as the Samatha publications of Jnaneshwari, which is Jnanadev's version of the Bhagavad Gita. And that is the one that's available, and that one is going to be in the chat window if it isn't already. There's a better one which I recently was introduced to, and I find it to be much better. The author is Yardi, Y-A-R-D-I. Yardi, but it's out of press. It's out of publication. And you can keep your eyes open, or maybe you can find it somewhere, I don't know. But I found it to be much better. And the next question, and for Shankaracharya's commentary, there's from the Ramakrishna Mission, there's a Gita with the commentary of the Ranganatha Swami. Yeah. So you can get his version of it. It's quite good. There are other ones like Gambhirananda Swami, whatever works for you. So now a question again about the Brahma and Lord Shiva. Somebody got a little confused when I talked about, when I shared Amma's quote about how the gunas go with the Trinity. And I had a feeling I was going to get some pushback because it's kind of hard to understand. It's a woman, and so I'll say she. She was surprised to learn the gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva relate their relation to gunas, Brahma being sattva, Vishnu being rajas, and Shiva being tamas. Then she had a lot of reasons why she was surprised, and they're understandable, and stories about what Brahma did and what Lord Shiva did, and then based on that, she was wondering why we should identify them with these three gunas, and so, and she has some, other background research that she provided. But I'm just going to explain what I understand. First of all, the reference about Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva was only about the gunas as they relate to the Trinity. The Trinity, okay? Which is more conceptual than actual fact. It's not, the Trinity is a way of covering the three states that we experience, even though they are all Maya. So we have to give it some kind of flexibility in choosing how to relate the gunas to the Trinity of deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. As the deity presiding over creation, Brahma, we can say Brahmaji is the creator, but we can say Brahmaji to make it clear. If you say Brahma, it sounds like Brahman, like Atman, Brahman. So we say Brahmaji to make it clear. Brahmaji needs knowledge, which is signified in goddess Saraswati. She has all the knowledge, so he needs her to be his holy consort, as they say. And to maintain the creation, Rajas is necessary, hence the association of Vishnu and his Shakti as goddess Lakshmi. She has all the wealth, she has all the minerals in her hand to make things work in the earth and all the growth of society and all that. So Lord Shiva is well understood as the deity presiding over the dissolution of the universe. So with his Shakti Kali or Durga, for that reason only is the association with Tamo Guna, which represents dissolution. We don't say that, Shiva is tamasic, all the time. It's just in the context of the Trinity and these phases: creation, sustenance, and dissolution. And I read the comments from the Puranas, the quotes or the references to the Puranas that she sent. And I would like to say that please don't take the stories in the Puranas too seriously. In the words of the late Shankaracharya of Kanchi, the real purpose of the Puranas is to serve as a magnifying glass for the Vedas. The principles and rules of dharma that are briefly dealt with in the Vedas are enlarged or elaborated upon in them in the form of stories. A subject briefly touched on may not make a deep impression on the mind. If the same thing were told as an absorbing story, it would at once make an impact on the mind of the listener or reader. So they're kind of, you can call it a magnifying glass, or you can also cut a little bit of extra masala, as they say. It's a little more dramatic, intentionally, so that it's gripping, and so that we want to read the whole thing, and we won't forget the teachings. And we should also understand that there are 36 Puranas, 18 major ones and 18 minor ones. Each one praises the deity that is the main focus of that Purana. And they often belittle other deities. So if you read the Brahma Purana, it would have been the other way around. Then there's Vishnu Purana, and then it wouldn't be Shiva. Then it would be Vishnu would be better than Brahma and Shiva. There's Vayu, which is the god of water. And then you have a Purana for him, for Agni, which is fire. Linga, which is the Shiva Linga. We have Varaha, which is the wild boar. Vamana, the midget, the dwarf, who came as an incarnation of Vishnu. There's Kurma, Matsya, Garuda, Narasimha, Shiva, Manava, Varuna, Kalika, so many. Deva Bhagavata. So they're always going to say, this God is the best. And then there'll be some stories that show that the other guys don't cut it, you know. It's got to be Shiva, it's got to be Ganesha or whatever it is. So just expect that. And it's not a bad thing either way, because it's a text meant to make people fall in love with that deity. So that's okay. You know, so it's understood, and it's kind of a technique, a known technique, which I think is completely harmless. There are one more question, but I didn't get to share that answer, which I'll do next time. And now we will close for the time being. Those who have time can join us for a short meditation. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Let us meditate together for some time. Slow down your breathing. Check your posture. And close your eyes. With each long, deep breath, feel your body and mind relaxing further and further. Feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel that you're in her embrace, in the warmth of her heart. Now fix your awareness on the rhythmic flow of your breathing process, as though you are sitting on the bank of a peaceful stream, watching the flow of the water. Be a witness to the breathing process as the air comes in and out. As we visualize in this way, the mind becomes more subtle and we're capable of visualization. Try to visualize yourself with the virtues of a Brahmana. And let us visualize that we are getting those qualities from Amma. We have imbibed those teachings from her. And it is the ideal version of ourself, subduing the mind and senses, performing austerity, completely pure internally and externally, with great forbearance, always straightforward, knowledge and wisdom in your heart, and faith. let us pray to our beloved Amma for her divine guidance, protection in accomplishing the visualization we just did. Oh, my beloved Amma, you are the perfect example of the Brahmana, the only Brahmana. I try to be like you, Amma. I need more strength. I try to follow in your steps, but my mind often fools me. And I may fall if you do not hold my hand. So Amma, please hold my hand and give me the power to follow in your steps, your footsteps, and to honor your values and your sacrifice. I know that you are adjusting to your foolish children, but please, please be with us. Make us feel your presence in our lives so we do the right thing. Now let us conclude with one more prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can open your eyes if you wish. Om Namah Shivaya. I hope to see all of you soon, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everybody. Om Namah Shivaya.